less than an acre foot of water. But you see, when they say engineering for the design, the systems will be brought up to current rule in order to support 8 additional RVs. There's, from what I'm reading, there's 2 different septic systems there.
Okay.
So that's what that is.
Mike Bacon.
Mike, nice to meet you. You Coast Guard? No. Okay. Nice to meet you, Mike. Proud to be aboard.
Were you Coast Guard?
No, but I'm looking for someone who's in the Coast Guard. That was recommended. I find out who the vets are around here.
The American Legion can probably
Looking for a
tell you.
vet out of the Coast Guard, it's me.
How's that?
I said if you ask the American Legion, they might be able to line you up with some
Who you
people from the
looking
Coast Guard.
He's Coast Guard down there.
So,
Is it Mr. Wells?
I'm retired Coast Guard.
Uh-oh.
you're the Coast Guard.
Yeah. I did 30 years, he's retired.
Yeah,
I wasn't old crippled.
He's an alternate. Well, an alternate.
I have a question. The DOT wants the driveway brought up to current standards. What are the standards?
I don't know what ADOT standards are. And we will allow that. It's like, these 2 items with ADOT,
Or ADOT's problem?
well, the ADOT will tell them what to do, and then the city will make sure that they comply. Just like with the septic system, the county is going to say this is what you need to upgrade to.
So that's why we're not concerned about the 3,000 gallon things.
That's, yeah, that's waste treatment. That's county environmental.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know too. So it wasn't no water. I completely out of text.
We'll call to order the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for December the 5th, 2017. Can we start with the, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Wells? Geary, sorry, Commissioner Geary. Too late.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
And could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Armstrong,
Here.
Commissioner Welker,
Here.
Commissioner Bacon,
Here?
Commissioner Van Wolfen,
Here.
Commissioner Baker, Vice Chair Maciek,
Present.
Chair Merritt is absent. Alternate Commissioner Geary.
Present. Thank you.
Okay. Item 4 on the agenda is consideration possible action to approve November 7th, 2017 regular meeting minutes. They were not in the packet, and that will be deferred to the next regular meeting. Item 5, staff reports. 5A, report on corrections made to October 3rd, 2017 meeting.
hi. Chair Pro Tem and Commissioner. I did want to report on we went and listened to those minutes from October 3rd, and there was an error in the minutes. The discussion did center around the park models and did not involve reducing the RV park spaces, so we made a change to the minutes per your motion.
Thank you. Item 5A on staff reports is a response to the public comment hearing at the November 7, 2017 meeting regarding town not imposing impact fees for growth and what the town's doing to reach safe yield.
And thank you, Vice Chair Bastiak and Commissioner. Welcome, alternate commissioner
Thank you.
tonight. That's wonderful. What's that? All right, I'll talk a little louder. Make sure my voice projects. Okay, so just as it says in the agenda, the town does not impose impact fees for growth. But what we do, we do charge construction sales tax, plan review fees, and inspection fees when needed. So it should address the public's call to hearing. I'd also like to, if I may, continue on with the staff report on current events. I spoke with the chair after last month's meeting, and just to reconfirm, we are going to give you guys updates on what's going on both at the staff level and, you know, new applications popping into our queue that you may see down the road, just so you kind of have a pulse on what's happening in the town. Just to let you know, we have, since the beginning of the fiscal year, we've issued 38 single-family home permits for new homes, so you guys get an idea of the kind of growth we're getting. And just this month, we're only a weekend, we've had 4 applications, or 4 new permits issued for new single-family homes. Internal to our department, I'm not certain if you're aware of kind of our departmental structure. We have, in development services, we have the utilities billing and business licensing crew up front at our one-stop shop. They also do, they accept plans over the counter and submittals for rezonings in cases like that, as well as building safety, which is plan check and inspections in the field. They finalize permits and building permits. All of those have actually slid under my position. So we're back to where we were about 3-4 years ago, when the department was really a whole rather than a series of smaller departments that reported to the town manager. They've slid them underneath myself, and then, of course, Frank Marbury has the road crews and the engineering team under him. So between he and I, we more or less have all of the development services side of the town, and we report directly to Cecilia.
Super.
So it's really, really great for us to do that, because it really helps the left and the right hand know what's going on,
Yeah.
rather than we're all kind of doing our own thing, you know, working in a small silo. So we're really excited about that. In regards to new projects, you know, things oftentimes will slow down as we get into the end of the year because of holiday season, and people will wait until the first quarter to submit large projects, but we have more stuff coming in. Most recently, we have some calls. Looks like, I don't know if you recall, but a project by the name of Brooks Apartments. It's about 174 units they want to propose. It's going to be more or less across the street from the Hawks Nest Apartments that got approved behind the Walgreens over on 2 North. That's likely coming in the next few weeks for technical review meeting, and we suspect they'll submit for a multifamily PAD rezoning in January. So we're excited to see that. Several other inquiries on single-family home developments have come in, all for primarily for 1-acre lots, but we have some at Perkinsville Road and one east, northeast corner. We anticipate a formal application this week for 160 single-family lots, 7,000 square feet, that have water and sewer out front across from the community park. So those are some stuff coming down the pipe for you guys. So we're going to have probably a big first quarter with some large notable projects in the queue. So, and that's about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
One item on the report was on what the town was doing to reach safe yield. Are there any comments on that?
In regards to safe yield, I apologize, Chair or Vice Chair. I'm not exactly sure what that's referring to in terms of safe yield.
I believe the comments from the public were regarding safe yield as to the active management area and water.
Oh, in regards to water resources? Okay.
Yes.
In regards to the water resources, technically ADWR controls water permitting and making sure that the assured water supply certificate is provided to any new developments. For example, we have a recent project that is undergoing review right now with them, but we're actually taking a more active role with the retention of Mark Holmes as our basic water consultant. So we have a professional on board to help us ensure that we're working in tandem and in compliance with ADWR.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Item 6 on the agenda is public hearing. Item 6A is consideration and possible action regarding an application for Primrose Inn and RV for a conditional use permit, and that'll be reported on by the Associate Planner, Alex.
Good evening, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Before we start, I just want to make a quick note. There's some typos both in the staff report and the agenda in regards to the location of of both sites. Both of them are located on the north of the northwest corner of respective streets, and not on the northeast corner as indicated in the staff report and the agenda. So before you have an application for Primrose Inn and RV. Give me just a minute. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for the allowed use of 22 units, 22-unit RV park. The site is located approximately a quarter of a mile north of the northwest corner of West Road 2 North and State Route 89 intersection at 1304 North State Route 89. The parcel is approximately 3 acres. It is currently zoned commercial light. Currently on site, the site is being used as an inn or a hotel, as an RV park, and it has 2 residents. Just a brief history on the site. I hope this doesn't get too confusing, but I'll try to explain as clearly as possible. But Primrose Inn has been a development that has been here since the 1940s. It was first developed in 1942, and it was initially just an inn and a hotel, approximately 8 rooms. During the 1980s, 2 building permits were issued for the site for 2 mobile homes. I believe one of them was issued in 82, and the other one was issued about 87. In December of 1994, property was rezoned from R2, which at the time is a single-family residential, to commercial light, which is the equivalent of what we have now as a zoning district as a commercial light. During that time, doing research for the parcel file, neither staff nor council touched base on the issue of the mobile homes that were on site. At that point, when the new commercial light zoning district was issued, those 2 mobile homes became what is known as a legal non-conforming use, meaning that the 2 single family or the 2 mobile homes do not conform to the zoning, but are allowed on site. In March of 2000, then the property owner applied to issue for a conditional use permit for the allowance of 10 RV spaces. At that point, council approved the conditional use permit with an expiration date of 5 years. After 5 years, in 2005, the property owner again applied for a conditional use permit for the continuing allowance of 10 for those 10 RV spaces, or that section of the property identified as an RV park. And this time, staff stipulated that within 10 years, that staff or the applicant would have to apply again for the conditional use permit. In November of 2009, the parcel file has a letter, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing, but I want to touch base on this, and if there's any questions about it, I'll be able to answer those questions. But at the time, the assistant zoning administrator, Michael Beauvais at the time, wrote a letter clarifying some of the uses within the site. At this point, the site was receiving code violations in regards to structures that should have not been there, and therefore came this letter by Michael Beauvais again, who was the assistant zoning administrator at the time. And in the staff report, the section of the project history, the last paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, it states that Mr. Beauvais indicated that there is evidence contained within the parcel file that suggests that there have been unpermitted RVs on the property since the 1970s. Again, these are RVs, not mobile homes, RVs. Prior to the 1984 zoning code, Mr. Bovee concluded that the 4 additional RVs on the property outside the RV park were a continual legal non-conforming use. Therefore, they will be allowed to remain on the property in addition to 10 RVs in the RV park. In other words, what he was saying was that if we see here on the site map, when the applicant or the property owner first in 2000 applied for a conditional use permit for the RV park for the 10 spaces, it was indicated that the RV park would be along here. So this is the RV portion of the parcel. So the applicant or the property owner started getting code violations because there were other RVs that were not necessarily within the section of the parcel that's indicated as an RV park. At that point, Mr. Bovee concluded that those RVs had been there since the 1970s, and prior to the 1984 zoning code. So he concluded that those 4 RVs that were not within the RV park were now considered legal non-conforming use. And again, as indicated, legal non-conforming use is structures that don't comply with the current zoning of that parcel. So again, he concluded that at that point that that no more than 14 RVs would be allowed within the site. In I believe March of 2015, the conditional use permit expired for Primrose RV and Inn. Because of change of ownership and miscommunication, the new owners never came in and applied for a conditional use permit. At this point, staff started working with the current property owners, and they were giving guidance to apply for a new conditional use permit. The new property owners came in for both feasibility and tech review, and at that point, they desired to add additions to the RV park. They're requesting they're requesting a conditional use permit for 22 RV spaces. So this is a site plan that was submitted by the property owner. As we see here in the front is what was originally part of the Primrose from the 1940s that was developed, which is the office for the hotel, and these are the hotel rooms, the 9 hotel rooms. And this is where the RV park starts right here. Along with the 10 RV spaces that were originally approved for a conditional use permit, we also identified the 2 single-family residents that at this point are considered legal non-conforming uses. We have an RV here, and here that Mr. Bovee concluded that were also legal non-conforming use RVs. And continue to that, the applicant is also indicating the 8 additional new RV spaces and where they will be located.
I get it.
The applicant has gone through the citizens review process. He has notified property owners within a 300-foot radius. A neighborhood meeting was conducted in November of this year here in town chambers. At said meeting, a property owner in north of the property attended said meeting, and she's located, I believe, right here in the back. She had no issues with the property owner's desire to continue the use of the RV park or the addition to the 8 additional spaces. What she did note was that there's a fence going along the north portion of the property, and at some point that fence ends. So what she wanted was that fence continue to the end of the property to be a buffer between Primrose property and her property in the back. And typically, for commercial property, we're requiring a 6-foot fence. I talked to Mr. Tim Hendrickson, who is the applicant's representative, and he indicated that the fence is currently 6 feet, and that they would continue to extend the fence to the back as desired by that property owner. Analyzing this proposal for the applicant, the property currently, the zoning within the property is in compliance, or is in conformance, sorry, with a general plan. This property is identified in the general plan as a commercial multifamily residential, and the property will stay within that same zoning district. The commercial light zoning district allows the use of mobile home parks to not exceed 25 units. The applicant is requesting for 22 units in total, so he's within those requirements, and it's listed as a permitted use as a conditional use permit, which is what the applicant is applying for. As I stated before, the applicant went through a feasibility meeting and a tech review meeting. During said meetings, both ADOT and Yavapai Environmental Health brought up issues with a said site, and those issues are stipulated as stipulations for approval of the conditional use permit. I want to touch base on that quickly. ADOT indicated that because there was a change of ownership, that the new applicant needed to apply for an encroachment permit. He also stated that the applicant will need to bring the sidewalk or the entranceway, the driveway of the property to the current code. Richard, who works with ADOT, said that he was willing to work with the applicant in those issues. Yavapai, that deals with septic tanks, environmental health division, indicated that currently that there is 2 septic tanks there, and that the additional 8 RVs will need that because of the additional 8 RVs, that septic would need to be upgraded as well. So at this point, staff is recommending that the commission forward with approval of those 22 RV spaces with the stipulations set forward. Prior to the meeting, one of the commissioners brought up an issue that he had about the RV spaces, about the 22 RV spaces, and how we would be able to regulate these stipulations. In order for the applicant to go forward for development for these RV spaces, he will need to pull permits with development services, both electrical permit and building permits. Staff will not issue those permits until the applicant complies with those stipulations, and that's how we're going to keep an eye on it. The applicant is Mr. Tim Hendrickson is here. If you have any questions for him, or the representative of the applicant is here, sorry, Tim Hendrickson. If you have any questions for him or of me that I might be able to answer.
Mr. Lermer, I have a question regarding the ADOT requirement. I notice he has quite of a large entrance curb cut there. Can you describe to us what type of requirement that ADOT is requesting?
Yes, it was my understanding that if I can remember back, Primrose currently has two entrances, one here and one here. And maybe Mr. Hendrickson will be able to fill in on the gaps that I may not be able to remember. But he was requesting that this entrance be blocked off or not be used as an entrance anymore. The driveway is not within the ADA requirements right now because the way the driveway is designed now, there needs to, in order for it to be ADA compliant, there needs to be like after it goes up in the little slope, it needs to go, there needs to be some type of lip for somebody who was walking with or going by with a wheelchair, he'd be able to angle his wheelchair around it. I wish I had a picture, but I don't.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, so they don't tip their chair in the highway. Go ahead.
In my last meeting with ADOT, which was about 3 weeks ago, on the driveways, both driveways will remain, but the one driveway to the south is way too big. It's going to have to be shrunk down to 40 foot. There's currently an obstruction in the middle of the driveway. I believe it's about 45 or 50 foot. And then there's an obstruction in the middle of the driveway and then another 20 foot of space. That obstruction has to be removed and the driveway on the south side has to be shrunk down to 40 feet. So it will be quite a lot less of a driveway on the south side. The north driveway will remain and is used as as kind of an in and out for postal and stuff like that. One of the other things that we did request that staff didn't mention yet was that we were hoping, we've been an RV park for a long time, been involved with this property for, 12 or 15 years. I'm the guy that's out there that does repairs and does the things when it's broken. It's like that. We were hoping at this time, and I know there's ways to govern it, that we could get a perpetual use permit at this time, so we didn't have to come back and forth with you unless we were going to make changes in our site. We think we've been a good neighbor to the town. I think we've made just tons of improvements. I mean, it's one of my biggest projects. I'm there, all the time. We're doing improvements all the time and trying to make it look nicer. And I think that people that have lived here for a long time, if you drove by it in the last year or two or last 5 years, you could see what it looks like compared to what it looked like 15 years ago. But I think we're continuing trying to improve it and make it a little bit nicer and trying to compete with the new hotels that are here in town and trying to compete with the new RV parks in town and stuff like that. Last year we had a mobile home. I don't know if you guys all remember. We had a fire on the property. We had an old double wide mobile home that was in the rear by the garage. It burned down, and that was why we were back here. We didn't want to replace it, the mobile home. We just wanted to add some additional RV spaces with that. And we have a couple of these existing mobile homes that have been there for decades and decades. Ultimately, I'll be coming to the city and taking those out too, and replacing them with one or two sites there. But for right now, like I said, if we'd love to, we're at 22 units. I think that's going to set us for a while. But we'd love to have a perpetual, so we didn't have to come back, every so often and go in front of it. I think we've proved that we've been what we're going to be for the long time, and like I said, I hope everybody in town thinks that we've made nothing but improvements. The sidewalks will have to be redone in front of it. They actually have to turn in, and they go inside the property and then go back of the approach and then out. So I've already working on the permits for those. And there's a standard detail that the county has, or ADOT has, I'm sorry, for those driveways. We've agreed on everything. We've agreed on the size of the driveways, and we're just waiting to get your guys' approval to go to the next step.
Thank you.
I have a
Thank you.
question for
For-
Mr. Lerma.
For the record,
Oh,
please,
I'm
could you
sorry.
state your name?
My name is Michael T. Hendrickson, or Tim Hendrickson I go by. I've been in the community and around here, and I own properties in the neighborhood and stuff like that, and I do most of the work out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question for Mr. Lerma. Mr. Lerma, I noticed you did not indicate any time limit in your conditions. I thought that was a good idea. Am I to assume that we will not be placing any time limits on this conditional use permit?
You know what? There was a discussion set by, or one of the points brought up by Mr. Hendrickson about it being a perpetual use. Currently, the zoning district only allows it as a conditional use permit. With a conditional use permit, usually there is a time limit associated with it because it is a type of use that changes over time. For instance, this is a perfect example. It went from 14 and now it's 8 additional spaces. And that's why it's listed as a conditional use. If he desired for it to be as a permanent use, then the only way to go about it would be to rezone the property to commercial heavy. The commercial heavy zoning district has it as a permitted use without a conditional use permit.
I would just like to address the commission on this. I've worked for a few jurisdictions that did not place any time limit on a conditional use permit. This is a financial investment by the property owner, and usually that means it's long-term and the conditions should be applied. One jurisdiction I was in, they also had a time limit, and it became somewhat of a revolving door. They were always in here applying for a new conditional use permit, and everything remained the same. I was under the impression that we were not going to put a time limit on that, and I would just like to say that I would support no time limit, but that's just my suggestion to you. I don't know if staff has anything to say about that.
Right. One of the reasons I left it open because that was part of the discussion that the commission be basically a decision that the commission will make as far as the time limit on this conditional use permit. As you see the pattern, they went from 5 to 10. I mean, I've seen conditional use permits for rodeos and those type of such events for 25, but it would be up to the commission to decide on that.
I have another question. Perhaps we can add another. I'm looking at future development to the west, perhaps single-family homes, and I'm thinking, well, they would like to have some protection also. So I would be thinking of another condition if property development becomes residential to the west. Fencing will also be provided along the west property line.
And Vice Chair and Commissioner Bacon, if I may, also step in and add some points. I certainly think we could agree to that. Typically, the first use in is the one that builds the improvement. The fence, you could do it conditionally speaking, they should do it at the time of development of the parcel to the west. That's not necessarily conventional, but you could do that. I would like to also add, if I may, to the points in regards to the CUP. I've worked on a number of CUPs in different types. Sometimes we refer to it as the wrecking ball stip as a joke when you put a time stip on it. Theoretically, in 5 or 10 years, they could be required to leave. And it also impacts their business model and their financing and all other endeavors related to the business, because anybody that would finance, let's say, an expansion of operations on a business with a use permit limitation may have trouble doing things to improve the asset. So in this case, considering the history of the property since, nearly 75, 80 years and RVs for 30, 40 years, we didn't feel it necessary to put another time stip on it. And ultimately, should ownership change, should the RV park go into disrepair, disarray, or become a nuisance to the community, we could initiate code compliance issues that could ultimately end up in a revocation of the CUP if we had to. So you do have an ultimate last recourse if you needed to do it.
Thank you.
So we don't need to put a time limit on it today.
Commissioner Van Wiffen, no, you don't need to put a time limit on today. If you'd like to forward to the council with consideration of a 10-year time limit, as was done with the last P&Z and council action, you may, but it's not staff's recommendation to put a time limit on it.
Okay.
Thank you. And Could we have the staff recommendation so we could move forward?
Oh, certainly. The staff does, I'm sorry, I thought I mentioned it, but the staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward to Town Council approval of the conditional use permit to allow a 22-unit RV park with the following conditions: that 1, an encroachment permit will be submitted to ADOT. 2, driveway will be brought up to ADOT's current standards of the standard detail. 3, the septic system will be upgraded to support the 8 additional RV spaces. And 4, fencing to the northwest portion of the property will be extended to serve as a buffer between adjacent properties, and fencing along the west boundary shall be installed at the time of future development of the west parcel.
Okay.
Question?
Question from commission.
Sir, and indulge me if I'm stumbling through this. With regards to the additional analysis, second paragraph, that Yavapai environmentalist specialists made comment about additional usage of water. Am I correct in understanding that?
Commissioner Geary, that's in specific relationship to the septic capacity. Yavapai Environmental will regulate that specifically, not the water services to the property.
Super, thank you.
Moving forward, are there any other comments from the public? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add another condition, but first of all, I would move to recommend approval to Town Council of this request for a conditional use permit for a property located approximately 1/4 mile north of the northeast corner of West Road 2 northwest corner of West Road 2 North and State Route 89 intersection at 1304 North State Route 89. This CUP would allow a 22-unit RV park with the following conditions. 1, an encroachment permit will be submitted to ADOT. 2, driveway will be brought up to ADOT's current standards. 3, septic system will be upgraded to support 8 additional RV spaces. 4, fencing to the northwest portion of the property will be extended to serve as a buffer between adjacent properties. And I would like to add condition 5, if it so please the commission, if property develops as residential to the west, fencing will be provided along the west property line.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Item 6B, consideration possible action regarding application by Olson Grain for a conditional use permit. Staff?
Thank you, Vice Chair Pashak and Commission. We have a request for Olson's Grain. As you know, it's been a part of the community for quite some time, located off of SR 89, just down across from the Days Inn. They've come in for a CUP request to allow an electronic message sign. To illustrate where the property is located, you can see the parcel highlighted in yellow, a large parcel in the back with the kind of almost like a flag lot where the driveway is located, as well as the location of the sign, which would be just back of the property line along the SRD9. Across the street, you can see, of course, today's Inn, and then to the southeast, the National Bank. Surrounding the property is relatively vacant, kind of rural uses, although there is a large lot home to the west along West Road 1 South. Which is, of course, kind of opposite side of the property from where the sign would be located. Here's kind of a blow-up of the property. You can see the various Olson's Grain buildings for the development. You can see the driveway comes in, cuts kitty corner across the parcel that's to the east. They service those buildings, and then that's where the trucks load and offload materials for the business. And I imagine where customer pickup is as well. The APN number is shown in your property description along with the site address, as the site is about 2.8 acres and it's zoned commercial light. So when we look at the sign code, of course, we look at all the sign code requirements that pertain to commercial light. The new sign, the old sign would be removed, and the new sign would be constructed. It's approximately 15 feet tall, 180 inches. Some of you may have caught that in the code. There's a sign, the sign height limitation of 12 feet. But if you read further the development standards that are allowed, we would measure the overall sign height from the grade of the nearest adjacent roadway, which is the SRD9, and it has been laser measured at 3 feet higher And then this sign, so the sign is sunken down, and so to accommodate that, they're allowed to go to 15 feet so that the sign can be as visible as it would be if it were at grade with SR 89. So it wasn't an oversight by staff, it was just we can accommodate it through the current code provisions. The electronic message panel, as you can see, is the Equest. It's got a sample message on it, whatever that is, Equifest this weekend. And then it would have a cabinet panel sign just on top of that. Staff's been in discussions with the applicant. We had concern from one of the council members as well of our own concern about the appearance of white translucent signs at night, especially at such a dark stretch of the 89. This sign is going to be noticeable, which is what signs are supposed to be, but we don't want it to be too noticeable to where it glares at people, because everybody in the brother town is going to notice this sign when it goes up, especially an LED sign. So we've talked with the sign company consultant that's been working with Olson's Grain, and they're willing to install a 3M kind of blackout translucent film on the back of the white panel, so that the white area you see surrounding the Olson's oval would actually black out at night and not be fully transparent, and then it would just be the Olson's circle or oval in the middle that would illuminate so that those letters could still be read. We just wouldn't have a big white bright box. They've done that voluntarily. Theoretically, tying a condition to that portion of the sign isn't related to the LED sign, but in the effort of being a good neighbor, they're willing to do that. So it's not in your conditions of approval. You could add it, or we could just process it at the building permit level based on the discussion here, as well as what we have at council. And I'm definitely on board with that. So you can see the message panels there, and then the address below it. So in terms of sign area, sign height, and other development standards, it meets all of our standards. The sign location would be located here, minimum of 6 feet back of property line to conform with code or comply with code. And it would be just to the north of their drive entrance. It would be two-sided, so the sign panels would be visible from both directions of S39. These are the specific sign regulations. This is just for reference in the document. It's not tied to the approval. They're already bound to these regulations. And then for reference for electronic signs, we wanted to make sure that you saw that, of course, it's subject to the use permit, and that, in terms of maximum height and things like that, it's all listed here. We've reviewed this to ensure compliance, so they do at this time. One thing that we did have the biggest concern about, and I've been working with LED signs for over 15 years, in fact, had to write a couple sign codes myself with these, is we're always concerned with animation, flashing, anything else that becomes a nuisance. The intent of a changeable message panel sign isn't to become obnoxious just to get your attention, but rather to give the retailer or whomever, the business owner, the ability to provide more information that changes on a rotating basis, not to distract you so that you get in a car accident or just to be a nuisance. So what we've talked about is ensuring that there's not animation, there's not, firecrackers going off on this thing you may see in some car wash signs down in the valley, or any other sort of kind of attention-grabbing functions that these signs can be programmed with, depending on which sign you purchase. In this case, it's really a relatively simple LED sign, and they can control brightness manually, so that there should be a light. It can be programmed through software by time of day to reduce brightness at night, because you'll need more brightness during the day to compensate for sunlight, and then at night it can be reduced. As we proceed forward, there are ways to measure brightness with LED signs. Their lightness emission is measured in what's called nits, N-I-T-S, but nobody seems to really have a firm grasp on how many nits are too many nits, and so we're getting really deep in the weeds on the technical side. So instead of trying to say you can only have 1,500 nits at this time of day, we've just kind of come to an agreement with the condition on here, since it is a CUP and you can levy conditions to mitigate negative impacts on surrounding properties and those on the SR 89, that if we receive, the dimming function will be programmed at the time of installation, so it doesn't stare in your face at night particularly. But if it is found to be too bright, that it's not just conveying the sign message it's intended to, but it's actually become a nuisance, that they will agree to modify the sign at the approval of development services and manually adjust the brightness even further down, to the extent that we feel it's the issue's taken care of. So we wrote the condition somewhat loose on purpose so that we have wiggle room with the applicant to modify and correct the situation if it's a problem. So that said, that's way of doing something when we don't know how to do it technically and measure nits. So hopefully you'll find that acceptable as a staff condition of approval. So staff is recommending approval of this, or recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward to Town Council approval of the conditional use permit for the electrical display for Olson's Grain, subject to those 3 conditions, which include that there won't be any animation, and that messages must remain static for at least 8 seconds with a transition time of no greater than 2 seconds. And we actually pulled that from ADOT's regulations, which we researched so that we could be complementary to ADOT's rules. They don't want the sign flashing and changing messages every 3 seconds, which would distract drivers on the 89. The second one is in regards to the excessive brightness or glare at night, that they'll agree to work with us to reduce glare. And then lastly, that the information displayed on the electronic sign shall be exclusive to the property's activities and events only. Otherwise, it's considered an off-premise sign and a billboard. You know, somebody could pay $50 to have, you know, mattress sale down the street, or Safeway apples, 99 cents a pound. We don't want to see that, because then it also triggers another ADOT thing. It becomes a billboard to ADOT, and then we have a whole different issue. So they have to get special permits for that, and so that we put this on here to complement our ADOT partners. So.
Okay, super.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Moving
Pam.
forward, any questions from commission?
Mr. Chairman Pro Tem, on the Primrose matter and on this matter, I don't believe we opened a public hearing on either one, and we should have.
I thought I had asked for public hearing on
think you
Primrose.
did.
Public
It
comments.
wasn't very
Yes,
loud,
for
but yeah,
public
you did
I
comments.
said public comments. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Could we have comments from the public regarding the Olson sign? Is the applicant here, and would he like to say something?
Vice Chair, yes, the applicant is here. He's willing to speak. Wants to.
Okay, closing public comments and proceeding, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman Pro Tem, I would like to add a couple of conditions to whatever motion that is being put forward. First of all, I'd like to compliment staff for bringing up the idea of opacity for the white sign. However, I would like to see that as a condition of approval. I would like to add that as a condition that the white background shall be made opaque in the evening, so no light shines through it. That would be condition number 4. Then I would like to modify condition number 1. This is a CUP, and in the future, we could have code changes as to the transition times and the static times. And, you know, this could be a lot of confusion for staff with all the CUPs coming in. We're going to have one for this, one for that, one for this. And I'm thinking it would be good to modify it just a little bit. On condition 1, the applicant will modify the static and transition times should the town develop a code requirement for electronic signs. And that way it would be consistent throughout the town as to what the electronic message boards will be reading.
Could I have comments from staff?
Thank you, Vice Chair. And Commissioner Bacon, are you suggesting that we eliminate the condition and just defer to future code updates? Because I
No.
believe, okay, if I may, my understanding of the current code is that it's silent on the issue, and it shouldn't be, although we do have a requirement for 6 static minutes for public facility or schools. For some reason, it's just silent on commercial uses, so we deferred to the ADOT as a complement to their concerns and requirements to not go more frequently than 8 seconds.
Okay.
So, I mean, we could do it in the future. I've done codes where we've done 45-second static messages, so it's really static. So it's
I'm
up
not
to you.
looking at changing a requirement. I want to keep it, but in the future, if we should get complaints to increase it or decrease it, we would have to open the conditional use permit process up for everyone because it would be grandfathered in. Would they not be?
No, Commissioner Bacon, I think you make a good point. I'm just trying to understand how we would modify a condition to accommodate future code changes, which could basically change the length of how long a message stays on there. It would be like a sliding, moving, depending on what code we're in, and I don't know how we would regulate that. I guess we could. I don't have Phyllis here to tell me on this one. This is a good question. Could we kind of just go with the flow with future codes? Like, this is good for now to hold it,
Mm-hmm.
but in the future, if we decide we need at least 15 seconds because we don't like 8 seconds, then
It'll be
do they end up getting a stricter condition out of it. I don't know if we can do that. I guess we could. Do you-
8 seconds is DOT's
As
requirement?
ADOT, and
I-
we are embarking on a code rewrite, right? As you know, we've started the UDO rewrite, and signs will be reopened. I know we just adopted this code, and it needs, to be honest, it needs a little more help. And it's case in point. So I think we could modify it. It also could accommodate ADOT in the future if they decide 8 seconds is not enough, and we mimic
Exactly.
them. We could go to 15 or whatever it is, or they could go lower. Okay, so we would change it to be. You could add a second sentence, and then could include language that would static message and transition times shall change with future code adoptions or something like that.
Yeah, the applicant will modify the static
you got
and
it.
transition times should the town develop a code requirement for electronic signs. And we could ask the town or ADOT, and/or ADOT.
I think that's acceptable.
I just don't, as a former planner, it became a bureaucratic nightmare to go through all the codes and have everybody having their own grandfathered in code requirement that we gave them as a commissioner council. And I'm trying to make it flexible so when we develop a new code, it affects everybody and not just selected businesses.
And thank you, Commissioner Bacon. I think the only thing that I've seen in my past is that in certain locations, we've had dangerous curves and corners, and so we've had placed longer restrictions on some signs, whereas at other places, it wasn't as concerning. And so the conditional use permit gives you the flexibility to be site-specific. But in this case, I mean, it's just it's a long stretch of SR89. I don't see why we couldn't build that in. I just wanted you to know why
Yes.
we would have different timeframes for different locations if it was considered a public safety issue.
I appreciate your
Yeah.
input on that.
Thanks.
So I have a question then to make sure that I understand what you're saying. If we have an Olson's Grain on a curved road somewhere, we would change the time limit on the,
Commissioner Randolph, if we were in a dangerous corner, like for example, if you've ever been in the Phoenix area and Baseline Road auto corrects on the grid, and those crazy curves, that's where that one sign was for a car wash. So we wanted static message changes no less than every 45 seconds because people were too busy navigating pedestrians and curves to be looking at changing messages. So we did have a more
Okay,
strict one.
we can do that case by case based upon the fact that it's a conditional use permit, correct?
Yes, you can. Your use permit, the concept of the use permit is to mitigate impacts on surrounding properties and also to address any potential life safety issues.
Okay.
With that clarification, I would entertain a motion. I believe you were making a motion.
Okay. I was going to let someone else do it, but I'll be happy to jump in and do that. I move to recommend approval to Town Council of this request for a conditional use permit for the proposed electrical display for parcel 306-29-029C, located approximately 860 feet north of the northeast corner of West Road 1 North and State Road 89 at 334 South State Road 89, subject to the following conditions. The electronic sign will not contain any form of animation and must remain static for at least 8 seconds with a transition time of no greater than 2 seconds. The applicant will modify the static and transmission times should the town council and/or ADOT develop a code requirement for electronic signs. Number 2, in the event this sign receives community complaints due to excessive brightness or glare at night, the applicant shall submit sign modification plans to the Development Services Department for review and approval that ensures brightness and glare are reduced to satisfactory levels. 3, that information displayed on the electronic sign shall be exclusive to the property's activities and events. And 4, the white background of the sign shall be made opaque during nighttime illumination.
Point of correction, it's the northwest corner, as staff mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Item 7, non-public hearing action items. There's none listed. Item 8, discussion items. There are also none listed. Item 9, at this time, we open the meeting for public comment. Mind the individuals, they're limited to 3 minutes. If anyone wishes to speak, they can come up to the podium, state their name and address. Seeing no comments from the public, I'll close that section. Item 10, adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we adjourn, sir.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's vibrating.
Never mind did anything at all. Nobody calls me.
Good to see you. Last name Gary. Gary, thank you for the education. I love it. Happy holidays.